Welcome to When We're Not Hustling, a podcast where sex workers talk about everything but. I'm your host, Jessie Sage.
Put away the lingerie. I want to know you. Tell me more. I don't care about the news. I want to hear about you and see the world from your point of view. The coffee's already made, so I'll part the shades, just pull up a chair and tell me more.
When We're Not Hustling is a weekly podcast that explores the lives and identities of sex workers outside of our work personas, our personal philosophies, ambitions, families, relationships, passions, spirituality, and so much more. We talk about our lives beyond the job, asking, what does the flexibility of sex work allow us to do, and who does it allow us to be? On this show, we learn who sex workers are outside of the work we're known for. When We're Not Hustling is an exploration of the people behind the fantasies. When We're Not Hustling is brought to you by Assembly 4. Assembly 4 is a collective of sex workers and technologists working to bring the overall cost of sex work down through their advertising platform, Tryst.link. They also educate clients through the Good Client Guide and provide resources and articles written by and for sex workers. Assembly 4 caters to all genders and demographics and raises funds to fight for sex worker rights and against exploitation in the sex industry. Learn more at assembly4.com. ASSEMBLYFOUR.com. Hello, welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I am your host, Jessie Sage. This is episode 19, which makes this the final normal episode of season 1. And I am shocked that we've made it this far into season 1. Not shocked that we've made it, but the time has gone so fast. So I am really proud of the show. I think it's been really lovely. We've had amazing guests. I love the music that is the product of Emily, our producer's husband, Ben J. Benamati. That's been amazing. I love having a custom song. Both of them are going to work between season 1 and season 2 to revamp it a little bit to make it even better. And I'm excited about that. We are going to be doing a couple more things between season 1 and season 2. We're taking about a 3-week break, and we will come back with season 2 with, just some new flair. And so we're excited about that. We're also looking for new sponsors for season 2. So if you are part of an organization or if you are an individual who wants to contribute to the show, we welcome that. We would love to give you a shout out on the show. Also on the website, in the show notes, we put a lot of work into the show. And so we would love to be able to kind of cover our costs here. So we also want to give a shout out to Tryst, which has been just an amazing sponsor. And we appreciate that so much. This season has been really lovely for me. I'm sure many of you who listen to the show will remember this because it was our most listened to show, but I had my mom on the show to talk about what it's like to be a mother of a sex worker. And what I wanted to do to close out this season before the roundtable, that's going to be episode 20, is to bring another really important person in my life onto the show, my partner, PJ Patella-Rey. So we have been married for a long time. We've been together for 10 years, and I built this career that I have with PJ. And a lot of people, I think, underplay that or don't understand that. But PJ and I got together. PJ was working on the side as a cam model. PJ showed me the ropes and taught me how to do webcam, how to edit video, how to edit audio. So the only reason I even know how to have a podcast is because we worked together for 5 years on Peep Show podcast, which was the show we hosted together. And then for many reasons that they're going to talk about in this episode, they went in a different direction. They stopped doing sex work or being involved in sex work organizing and media, and have a full-time job as a gender and sexuality professor. And while they did that, I got more involved in sex work and sex work writing and sex work podcasting. So we're going to talk a little bit about that story and what happened with that. And then they're going to talk about, the life that they have as now the spouse of a sex worker. And we're going to talk, it's fairly personal. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that we face and how we negotiate our lives with my work and family life and expectations. So I saved that one for last because I wanted to close out with, with something personal. And so we're going to have PJ on today. Next, after that, we're going to have episode 20, which is the last episode of the season. We are going to have 5 of the guests that have been previously on the show together to have a roundtable discussion. And those guests are going to be my mom. She's coming back for this. So I'm really excited about that. She's going to get to meet some of the other guests. Pucks Aplenty, who came on to talk about fat phobia. Trip Richards, who was our very first guest, who questioned the idea of the possibility of this show altogether. Mary Muse, who played piano for us earlier in the season. And Melissa Milk, who you've been seeing a lot of in the after parties. So those are going to be our roundtable guests, and Emily Foster, the producer, and I are going to host it. We will be asking all of our guests to do some reflecting and some talking amongst each other about what feeds their spirit. And I hope that you all enjoy that. I think we will just move right into the interview. I don't know how much of an introduction PJ needs. They're not plugging anything. In fact, when I asked them to do this, they said, there's not that much in it for me. I don't need to do a sex work podcast, but I will do it because I love you. So I guess that is how I will introduce them. They're here because they love me. I will give a little introduction, actually. They have a PhD in sociology and a master's degree in philosophy, and they teach gender, sexuality, and women's studies at the University of Pittsburgh. And they are a great professor and a great parent and a very nice spouse to me. So that's the best introduction I can give. Oh, and they take good pictures too, which you've probably seen. Most of my pictures, not most of them, many of my pictures are taken by PJ. So with that, let's turn to our interview. Welcome, PJ.
Hello.
Hi. I'm so excited that you're here.
I am happy to be here.
You were a bit reluctant when I brought it up over a diner meal.
Well, I just don't know that I have anything interesting to say, but I'm sure you can pull something out of me.
Oh, honey, you have lots of interesting things to say. So this is the last real episode of season 1. This is episode 19. And the reason that I thought it would be great to have you on is that the whole overarching purpose of the show, as you know, because I talk about it incessantly, is to talk about like what sex work allows sex workers to do and be outside of their lives of sex work, like what we're doing when we're not doing sex work. And so far, everyone that we've had on the show has been somebody who's actively doing sex work. And you are not actively doing sex work, but you are actively living a sex worker life. And this is something that we don't talk that much about how sex worker lives like impact the lives of their family members. And for people who are new to me, you are my spouse. So I thought it would be great to talk to you about what your life looks like as a sex working spouse. But before we get into that, I think we should talk about the fact that you weren't always outside of the industry.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that's an important point. I don't know if I have a lot of different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly was a sex worker.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you were a sex worker before I was.
That's right. And and I think when we interact with people, they often assume the reverse.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But when you
like that, I brought you in as like a stunt cock or something, but you like were working way before me.
Yeah, on my own and with other people. And those were in like the old days, the kind of wild west era of camming when there were just so many fewer people doing it, and you could just
Right.
kind of go on and not really prepare anything, not have any sort of setup. If you
Mhm.
had a light, you were high tech, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you just pointed a computer at, you know, at yourself and interacted with people. I
Right.
mean, geez, it's scary to think that that was almost 15 years ago.
When you
Um,
started?
yeah, or at
Yeah.
least, you know, the era I'm talking about.
Yeah, because we
I
started together 10 years ago, but you were doing it several years before that, right?
a couple years.
Okay.
Yeah. And but I was sort of aware of it.
Mhm.
You know, I've always I don't know. I always have had friends in the industry.
Mhm.
You know, for most of my adult life, and have kind of was adjacent to sex work for a long time before I started dabbling in it.
Mhm.
And so I was pretty aware of it even before I started doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and um, yeah, I don't know. But a lot has changed, right? Because it was really
Yeah.
amateurish then,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it I mean, the whole internet has changed, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
it's changed
Mhm.
alongside, you know, the rest of the internet. Everything is so professionalized now, and
Yeah.
these are, like, recognized jobs in a way that
Right.
it wasn't back then. It was seen as something that you could dabble in more,
Mhm.
which I would be very skeptical of suggesting today.
Me too.
Even
Yeah.
when we started doing it, just the level of, you know, bots capturing and recording everything,
Mhm.
the degree that we've seen Google face, you know, searches, the power of how that's increased.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
um I feel like you can't well, I don't know. I mean, there are some people who still make a living without showing their face.
Yeah, you see a lot of that on like Pornhub and OnlyFans and stuff, but that's always surprising to me.
More than I used to see.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
um I imagine I mean, obviously some people make it work, but you know, in any case it was different then. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
it was a lot of people dabbling and sort of figuring things out on their own without any kind of I don't know, pre-existing pattern or structure, you know.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Mhm.
um and in any case, so I got involved, yeah, I mean, over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you know, and I want to be clear, I mean, I certainly tried a bit. I had good nights.
Mhm.
I was not making a living,
Mhm.
you know, not remotely. Um and even when we started, we really struggled to, you know,
Yeah,
we
no, we
weren't
weren't
making
at
a
the
living.
beginning at all.
You know, we were not we were picking up some extra income, and I mean, we started from a place of being really, really poor,
Mhm.
and so and really struggling. So back then it was like,
By really
cool.
poor, we were like looking for change to put gas in the car so we could like go to work.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It was like paying scraping enough money together for groceries, right? It was
Mhm.
like getting that 40 extra $40 we needed so that we could go out and buy groceries
Right.
and
Mhm.
feed the kids and stuff. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it was we were not like, oh, let's make a, you know, income that we could live comfortably off of. It was very much
Right.
survival, right?
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
and so I, you know, I don't want to like overstate, you know, I don't think I ever was a successful sex worker, but I was successful to the degree that I bought groceries when I needed to buy groceries, right?
That's where a lot of people are though. Yeah.
Y- yeah, yeah, or
Mhm.
put gas in the car. And um anyways, so you know, I started and I was a grad student at the time. I was trying for the first time, anyways, to write a dissertation,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just poor as heck because it's really hard to work and go to school at the same time.
Right.
And I had been living in DC to do that, and I mean, I was working some, but it was just hard.
Mm-hmm.
And this, college takes so much of your money. So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was just like not financially in a great place. And that's, that's where I started anyways. But, I guess, before we talk about where I'm at now, I should say that there are some pertinent things that happened in that 10-year
Mm-hmm.
period, that also sort of give context to why I can't just be like, oh, I'm a spouse of a sex worker, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Why my story is a little bit more multi-layered than that. I mean, honestly, I have a lot of trauma around sex work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, even considering doing this interview is kind of tough for me. I have been very avoidant for the last, I don't know, year or two, about engaging with sex work related things, beyond my role as just a support person for you.
Well, I think it's important to note that that's a pretty big shift because we ran a sex work podcast together for 5 years and we started the Pittsburgh swap chapter together. So
Mhm.
this is you not being very involved or being avoidant of it is actually a huge shift from
Yeah.
past times in our relationship in the past.
No, and I think that there was a point in time where it was sort of the center of my world and the center of my
Mm-hmm.
life. And when we were working together and building a podcast and camming together and doing all sorts of activism work, I do think it was like the center of my world for a long time. But a few things happened. Probably the most obvious is that I had cancer twice,
Mm-hmm.
and that both of those times, one happened sort of towards the beginning of our doing sex work together, and one happened at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And and the first time it was like not as big of a deal. I just had a testicle removed. It was
Mm-hmm.
definitely something I worried about, in part because I had a camera and bright light shining on me all the time. And,
Yeah.
and I was like, am I going to get a fake testicle? Are people going to notice that I, only have
Mm-hmm.
one testicle? Is that going to be a thing? And and for people who haven't watched, cams, like it's pretty, I mean, there are lots of supportive people, but it is like very common for mask of center people to be the target of like derision
Mm-hmm.
and I, I don't know, like
Yeah, it can be
people
kind of brutal.
people trying to assert their alpha maleness or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of like criticism of your um of your penis and penis size and
Mm-hmm.
balls and whatever, like um there's a lot of scrutiny. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was definitely kind of nervous, but that largely went fine. I got
Mm-hmm.
over it pretty quickly. And I don't know, I never really, like, the thing is, I was not out as non-binary at the time, out
Mm-hmm.
to my, I hadn't really fully worked that out for myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew I wasn't really invested in being a man or masculine.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
most of that stuff just washed over me anyways. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't really care if you don't think I'm like, as manly as you would be in bed. Like, that wasn't really what I was
That
going
wasn't the
for.
goal.
That wasn't the goal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, whatever. Um, I mean, I think I always came off as kind of queer, and that was
Mm-hmm.
exciting for some people. And other people, I don't know, wanted to fight me. And that's been true since I was a little kid. So
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
know,
Right.
some, not manning correctly,
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah.
definitely brings out violence in a lot of dudes who like, want to be, want to prove themselves,
Right.
a-
Mm-hmm.
as, legitimately masculine or whatever.
Right.
Um, Anyways, so, that was one thing, but then really, when the cancer came back, that's when it got really tough, right? Because like, um, you, in many ways, your value as a male-bodied person in porn, especially sort of more straight
Mm-hmm.
presenting porn, is um to make cum, right? To
Yeah.
ejaculate,
Mm-hmm.
to produce the money shot.
Mm-hmm.
And um and I, after all those surgeries, I mean, apart from being sick and losing all my hair and just like
Mm-hmm.
really never fully physically recovered from chemo, um, I can't externally ejaculate any
Mm-hmm.
longer. And that was really hard for me because, I talked about sort of the criticism I got for my gender presentation, but on the whole, I felt like, I don't know, I was able to do porn well. Like my body worked in all the
Yeah.
ways
Mm-hmm.
that it needed to work to do, porn.
Right.
Um, and that was all taken from
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I had I didn't really quit the industry as much as I just was forced to stop
Mm-hmm.
doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and sort of towards the end, we played around with some queer things. Like I'd put on gloves and work with you or
Yeah.
other people. And, there was a little bit of that. Um, but there just really wasn't, a lot of space to be a successful um, amateur
Right.
couple.
Mm-hmm.
At
How
least
was that
I felt,
like? Yeah.
without having a body that worked in the way that um, it is typically expected.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things, I was thinking about this as you were talking, that's been like hard for us in all of this as like a couple, as a real life couple, is that you very much supported and bolstered both my writing career and my sex work career by being a very good photographer and connecting me with people who could help me with my writing and all of these things. But because sex work is so heavily focused on um, women, I got a lot more of, like, I could stay in when you couldn't, and I got more of the credit for a lot of things that we did together. And I I know that that's been also something, especially as like after you were out of your surgery, that became a hard thing as like the spouse of somebody who got more credit for stuff that we did together.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what the
That,
best way to say about that
No,
is,
no,
but
I get what you mean. And there's another piece of this, right? So
mhm,
I had and have some body trauma around
mhm,
all of this. And I don't know, I'm still working through all of that. Like I've never fully, I'm still mourning the loss of that. Like
mhm,
I wish I I didn't want to retire from the industry when I
right,
did. That
mhm,
it really felt like that was taken from me.
yeah,
I really liked making porn.
mhm,
I liked the creative aspect of it. I
mhm,
liked, um, I felt like I was, I was saying like physically I was capable of doing it, but I also liked, um, like the visual aspect and the,
mhm,
sort of coming up with the ideas and the angles and,
mhm.
editing it all together. Like, it's like doing a fun art project, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I miss that as like a creative outlet too. And I really did enjoy that. And so that was all just kind of taken from me, which is really sad. But you're right. There is another level. And, it's just also about the interactions I've had around the industry or being in the industry have been hard in different ways. I mean, you're right. On one level, there was people were often dismissive of me. Um, you know, I don't want to say the industry's only focused on women. I mean, obviously there's a gay side of the industry as
Sure.
well, but I think as, a straight of center masculine person, um eh, you know um i I fall through the cracks. There's not really, you know if anything, people identify me more with clients than with
Right.
creator, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, because I'm non-binary, that just makes the whole thing that much more confusing. But I don't
Right.
know, we had a lot of instances in the industry where, like, oh, I still remember, when we went to that dungeon and that lady,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
handed me her drink, and then, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, I had just spent the entire day recording an event. I was like really sore and tired, because we were at an after party for an event that I just spent the entire day recording for a podcast. So I was like
Right,
on my
right. We were
feet
there as media. Yeah.
as yeah, doing interviews, like really heavily involved. And so, I put all my gear away and I walk in, still dressed in all black, because I don't know, that's how I
That's
always
your
dress.
uniform.
But that's also like a, photographer thing. Anyways,
Yeah.
and this lady hands me her drink and says, "Can you hold this for me?" And then I was like, okay, thinking like maybe she just, needed someone, I like just for a second, whatever. And I was just trying to be nice. And then she like starts to walk away and turns to her friend and says, see, all men are trainable or something.
Yeah.
And it was like,
She was putting you in like a sub position just because you happened to be there as somebody who appeared to be a man.
yeah, yeah. And, which for one, didn't consider the fact that she's misgendering me, but two, didn't consider the fact that, like, I was there to work. I wasn't,
Right.
is that like some dungeon or something? I wasn't there, as like a client. I'm not even a sub. Like like
Yeah.
that's not something I consented to,
Right.
or seen I was interested in participating in any way.
Right.
Anyways, when I realized that, I just put it on the ground. But but the point is just that, that is kind of a microcosm of, I mean, we had interviews where people, like, very intentionally and peep show refused to engage with me the entire interview or to acknowledge that I was a host.
Yeah.
I
Or would often like retweet the episode and only at mention me and not at mention you. That happened all the
all the
time.
time. Yeah. And, and so, like, and part of that's too, because you just had more fame than I did, but it was also a gender thing.
Yeah, but that's kind of wrapped into what we're talking about is like that
yeah.
fame like compounded the way that like I got recognition for things that we created together.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's just, I did a tremendous amount of work. We were equal partners in a lot of these things. Some of them were my ideas,
Yeah.
and, but when it came to recognition, I was often treated just as like a hanger on or an afterthought. Right. And, and I do sort of understand that there are definite, again, I've seen how different dynamics play out
Mm-hmm.
in the industry. There is certainly a trope of like, people starting companies with their boyfriends or whatever, and then seeking to exploit other workers,
Yeah.
but that's
Or of like partners being there to like extract money and resources from the sex worker or whatever, which was never the case with us. But yeah.
Right, exactly. But or that sex worker or other sex workers, right?
Sure.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I think, I can think of a number of cases where people, where there were like unsavory dudes in
Mm-hmm.
worker spaces who, seemed very transparently interested in, economically exploiting
Right.
workers,
Absolutely.
and also like separated themselves
Mm-hmm.
as non-workers,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
kind of put themselves in a managerial
Right.
category, right? Even though
Mm-hmm.
no one wanted that, right? No one invited them,
Yeah.
and
Like we're managing ourselves fine,
but
thanks.
right, exactly. And
Yeah.
so like it's not that I don't understand people's reticence, but like I was never in that situation. I was
Mm-hmm.
there identifying as a worker, actually doing the work,
Right.
and really interested, I don't know. I've never been interested in making money from other workers or,
Right. Mm-hmm.
anything like that,
Yeah.
we've
If
always,
anything, you've done a lot to like bolster other workers' careers and like taking pictures, doing videography, stuff that you often didn't charge for.
right. Yeah. I mean,
And the podcast itself, like promoting the work of a lot of different workers.
right. I mean, it was all community oriented, thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And I'm a community oriented person. The problem is I often felt left out of the community that I was oriented to.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that hurt me a lot. It did.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt me that I felt like I was so often in this like liminal space, this in between space where I never fit in anywhere, where,
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with all the stigma of being a porn performer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to deal with my family,
Yeah.
sort of, really rejecting that, and, fears about being, a professor who was naked on the internet. And,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, these were pretty big life fears.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily feel like I got the social support that I think a lot of other people seem to talk
Mm-hmm.
about getting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we met a lot of great people in the industry, and I do have a few enduring friendships, but,
Mm-hmm.
Often, even with people who were very interested in meeting and supporting you, I felt, like folks really wanted to keep distance from me.
Right.
And that's, probably has a lot to do with like a more mask presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, Maybe if I was like more M to F trans,
Mm-hmm.
like if I was more, feminine presenting, maybe things would have been different, but
Mm-hmm.
more non-binary, more,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and so that was a challenge. But also, to be honest, it wasn't just like feeling disregarded. It was also I found a lot of hostility um, in sex working communities. I don't think people talk about this as honestly and
Mm-hmm.
openly as maybe we should, but um, and it's a complicated issue to talk about because you don't want to feed the antis, but
Right.
people get into sex work for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people are seeking quick money. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people, have other struggles in their lives that make conventional employment very difficult.
Right.
And a lot of people who get into the industry are hurt people, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And And there's like a trope around that's
Mm-hmm.
problematic and in many cases not true, but
Right.
there are a lot of hurt people, a lot of people with a lot of trauma in
Mm-hmm.
the industry, and I say that because there's the sort of adage of hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, there is um my experience of trying to be in community with people and organize with people was that um there is actually a tremendous amount of hostility
Mm-hmm.
um within sex work communities and especially sex work organizing circles, and
Mm-hmm.
that there's a lot of competitiveness and a lot of people tearing each other down,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, a sort of tendency to assume the absolute worst of other people, to assume that people are um, acting out of self-interest at the expense of
Yeah.
you or community.
Right.
And um
I actually think it's interesting. I'm thinking about this as you're talking. I think the fact that you are so community oriented made that much harder for you than it does for me. And I don't want to say that I'm like a rugged individualist or anything, but like, I think that a lot of that, I'm just like, okay, I have a goal and I'm not going to like worry about all of that. And I think it like impacted you a lot more.
no, it was devastating for me.
Yeah.
And I am so communally oriented, and I spent countless hours. There was a significant period of time where I was doing volunteer work for the community as a full-time job, right?
Yeah,
In
there
addition
was.
to what, I
Mhm.
was easily putting 40 hours a week into like creating and serving and supporting,
Right.
sex work activism and sex work
Yeah, you
community.
absolutely were. Yeah.
It, yeah, that it really was like, you know, um, in so many ways, I was living the rest of my life in support of that and,
Yeah. Mhm.
giving the whole of myself, putting my life on hold,
Mhm.
not progressing in my career, or not,
Yeah.
but really, really focused on, you know, building that community and doing that kind of community activism. And yeah, and I honestly think that um at some point I just got burnt out. I was crushed. Like,
Mhm.
I think that, you know, I just encountered um I just could at some point I couldn't continue um to work in a space where there was so much hostility,
Mhm.
where people were so suspicious and so ready to think the worst of each other, and cruel, and just cruel. Um and I don't know that I've ever gotten over that. I think that I had to back away from a lot of this stuff because I was being like emotionally crushed by it, because I felt like,
Mhm.
I had given so much to it. And we accomplished so much. I mean, we ran a successful podcast for 100 episode. Um, uh, we, organized a swap chapter. We did
Right.
locally, we did that work nationally. We were we were fighting the DA here at home and getting targeted by cops,
Right.
like
Right. It was
it
intense.
was really intense, and I really felt out there. I really
Yeah.
felt vulnerable, and I
Mhm.
really, in so many ways, had put my life on hold. Because like, I don't know, because I'm a community and justice oriented person.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to When We're Not Hustling. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Doing so will help other people find us. And if you're a sex worker who wants to come on the show and talk about your life outside of work, we would love to have you. Please send an email with more information to nothustlingpod@proton.me. Do you think that there is space for you think that there is like non-toxic space for masculine presenting folks?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there are definitely some people, um, I'm thinking of like Connor Habib, who I follow pretty closely,
Although that's on the gay side.
Oh, we're talking about the not gay side of things.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously there's lots of space for masculine presenting people in gay land, but like,
I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. I don't even really want to be a masculine presenting person, so this is why it's hard to like. I don't.
Yeah, sure.
I don't really necessarily feel at home in a masculine body. I just don't have a desire to be coded as feminine. And like, what's the alternative? Be like bald and I don't know, like like, no, I mean, I'm nothing wrong with people who are, more androgynous, but like, I mean, that's legit too. But even that feels, I don't know. I have really, the problem is like, it's hard for me to even respond to the premise of the question because I have very conflicted feelings about like, I really wish I could get outside of gender, but I can't.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm like trying to find like, I don't really feel like I'm comfortable in any of the genders. So, but I am in a body that, produces testosterone at a fairly high amount, or at least does on and off, in between my surgeries. Depending on what pieces of my body are getting removed from because of cancer at a given time. But I don't know. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of very valid and concerns about not eclipsing other voices that like people who appear to be cis men obviously get a lot of platform and do just fundamentally have different experiences in the industry, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, I deal with sex work stigma, but I don't know that I deal with whorephobia in the same way that women do, right? Like, I feel like there is a distinction that we need to make, that men aren't shamed in this, the same way for, or people are seen as aren't shamed in the same way for, so-called promiscuity.
Right.
The idea of like, a whore being a public woman, right? Historically, somebody who was not, confined to the property relation that is marriage.
Right.
Well, that was, all men were perceived to be public men, or at least, all white men or all property owning men, or however we want to take a racial and class lens to that. But but all citizens, all men have a very different relationship, and I think have always had a different relationship to sex work, because it was less of like a radical undoing of gender norms.
Right.
Whereas for women, historically, it was not, not only was it sort of a violation of the sexual mores and even the laws of the time, but it was sort of a complete, disregarding of the entire gendered structure of society,
Yeah, right.
like,
So I guess what I want to move into, because what I want to spend some time on here is
yeah,
like now that you are in a space where, you have a full-time job in a university, you're no longer identifying as a sex worker, but as you moved away, I moved further into it. And like, what is it like for you to have a like actively sex working spouse, and what kind of impact does that have on your life? So yeah, I mean, we are married, and it's interesting that you brought up this like notion of like what a wife traditionally is, and I'm curious like how you uh what that is like for you, because I know you navigate a lot of that like stigma with me, and but I don't see what it's like for you when I'm not there. How you interact with your colleagues about that. I know how it is with your family, but
yeah. I mean, I think people tiptoe around it, but I
mhm.
also am I'm a gendered sexuality professor.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine like I was going to say safer, but actually it really depends on what department you're in,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because half of the, places across the country, the more sort of old school second wave feminist places would totally discriminate
Yeah, it would
against,
be very hostile. Yeah.
very hostile. I mean, I think would either refuse to hire me or kick me out of,
Yeah.
seek to have me fired over it.
Mhm.
So, and I have received a lot of hostility for, teaching courses about sex work in the
Yeah.
past. Um, but
But
at
in
the same,
terms of like being a spouse, how do you
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying is I think it's important though, because I'm
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
space where, I mean, for one, you're more public than most sex workers, right? You
Sure.
write about it very publicly in our alt weekly.
Yeah.
And then second, I'm in a space where to some degree that's, seen as an asset as opposed,
Mm, mhm.
I can say, well, I teach gender and sexuality and I have very relevant experiences. And so I'm able to
Yeah.
spin it as something that even if people have stigma and even if people are scared to bring it up directly, I'm
Mhm.
still able to spin it as, something that doesn't undermine my ability to like
But
whatever.
enhances it. Yeah.
Yeah, to be a coworker or in my job or just a
Right.
human being.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so you know, I I feel like I'm in a unique situation. Like I
Yeah.
don't I don't know that I'd care to generalize, but I still, I'm still obviously very attuned to these things. I
Mhm.
still do have very awkward experiences with like students who want to write about sex work and what, this stuff, especially with OnlyFans,
Yeah.
and the popularity of, subscription sites. I have students who like want to write about these things pretty regularly and do. And it, very often cuts closer to home than I think they realize, even though I'm
Mhm.
fairly transparent about it. But,
Yeah, right.
I don't know, you know, um, I don't know. They don't necessarily always realize that or take that in.
Yeah. Or
Um,
even know that we're married if they find my writing or anything.
right. I mean, I do usually talk about having been in the
Yeah.
industry, but, I'm, but I don't know. I mean, I know what you're asking. Um, it is a challenge. I mean, your listeners might, it is hard with family, but,
Mhm.
historically our family has danced around talking about your job. I
Yeah.
mean, at first, when they found out about sex work, they were really, um, kind of disparaging and,
Mhm.
you know, my mom said we lost our moral compass,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and um, and now, and I set pretty firm boundaries about all that, And
Yeah, you
just
did a good job of that.
that I'm not going to debate any of this with you. If you want to have a relationship, you just need to accept it and move on.
Yeah.
And but it's also meant now that we like have to act like you're a stay-at-home mom, even though you make the more money than I do. Like you're the breadwinner in this family, right?
Yeah.
And but like the way people talk and interact is like,
Right.
it just like ignores that you have a career in many
Right.
senses. Though as your writing has been taking off more and more, that's given us more to talk about. But
Right. Yeah.
but it's it's terrible to have to erase part of yourselves, and it's hard for me too because I also have to erase part of myself. And and that's the thing is it's like my issues, I guess you can say, I'm a poly person. Which isn't to say that I'm immune to jealousy or anything, but like my issues around sex work were never about like monogamy or, sexual exclusivity, or, that's never really been, a major struggle for me.
Right.
But it is a hard job. Like your job now is a hard job. Even just like this morning, I was like, I was staying up late. You had to, found out relatively late last night that you were going to have an early appointment. I had to get up early and take, our child to school. And there's like, um, one of the great things about the job is that it's flexible.
Yeah.
One of the hard things about the job is that it's unpredictable, right?
Right.
Like they're two sides of the same coin. And, I've fallen into the role of having the more predictable,
right,
steady job. But the toughest part of it for me as a spouse, I think, is that that especially when we need money, I feel like I can't plan on anything, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, um, the schedule can, at any moment be turned upside down, that I can end up needing to get up early or stay up late or just drop everything I'm doing or was expecting to do and pivot in order to make it possible for you to work, especially because we have kids.
Yeah. And that's true. You do. Like that is how we operate. Like there'll be times when I'm home for 4 or 5 days, which is great. But then we're like, oh, we're going to watch a movie tonight together. And then I'm like, never mind. I'm actually leaving. I have to go to work. And I think you always understand that because we, this isn't, we do this. This is how we make our money. But you do have to like, there's ways I think that I can understand if you feel like what we want to do together comes after like what my crazy schedule like allows for.
Right. And the thing is you're also like, because you like have 2 careers, because you're also a writer on top of that and are always constantly on deadline. And just in case your listeners haven't picked up, Jessie's like a real workaholic. And so, if you're not working for like 60 hours in a given week, then you're, you feel like you're not self-realizing or something. So,
yeah.
But
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So it's hard, like, and I think the hardest part is that there's a lot of disappointment. Like there's a lot of, oh, I'm really looking forward to something. And then it doesn't happen. And so then you teach yourself not to like get your hopes up, but in a way that's like not ideal, right? Because that's a sort of avoidant, behavior. Like you don't want to actually push down your feelings too much.
Right.
Like learning not to be excited about your relationship isn't super healthy.
No.
and so like I struggle with that. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I think that is one of the hardest parts, and I think we're still figuring out how to manage that. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's also true with like the tours. Sometimes you'll be gone for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and that can also be super hard. It's not like I don't have a job on top of it, but then I'm like, you know, single
Mm-hmm.
parenting a special needs kid for
Yeah.
and get no break from that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because even though we're supposed to have support systems, from the government, that
There.
none of those supports ever actually get provided.
Right.
And,
Right.
um, that's hard too. So I think that, I don't know. I just think that, yeah, the or the sort of, you know, unpredictability of the job on the one hand, and then the sort of, you know, needing to really travel a lot. And it's not like sex workers are the only people who travel, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
who, get, um,
But
but
I make a lot of my money traveling,
you do. And so,
or a large portion of my income traveling. Yeah.
also, all of that to say that I think maybe what think people might think are the hardest parts, again, which, I think a lot of people frame that as, like sexual
Yeah.
exclusivity, and, like the, desire for sexual exclusivity. That's not what I see
Yeah.
as the hard part
Mm-hmm.
personally.
Right.
The hard part for me are these that is this unpredictability. It's the travel.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way we're stigmatized by other people, and we have to kind of live half lives around
Mm-hmm.
family. And it's not just my family. Your mom didn't even like talk to us for 2 years,
Yeah. For a long time. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
or however long it was. And I think one of our kids is kind of one of
Right.
your kids, the older kids is kind of resentful about,
Yeah.
or has some shame.
Yeah.
I I think that those things are really hard too. But I don't know if those are the things that maybe people think of when they think
Right.
about
Right.
what would be hard.
Well, yeah. I think all of those things are really, really fair. And I think especially for you, I think when you think about the unpredictability, we also have to or I think part of that is that you're also autistic and would prefer like a more um predictable schedule than what I can actually give you. And I have ADHD and I'm really kind of bad at managing like my calendar and stuff. So when I suddenly was like, I have to go to work, you have to take our kid to school, I forgot to tell you that we had a contractor coming over who you were going to have to field by yourself and you didn't even know he was coming. Like,
That's true.
and so like there's a lot of that stuff. But on the other hand, and I'm always a little bit more optimistic than you maybe, but like I also think that the reason, those are all of the downsides, but like part of the reason that we have both like chosen to continue to like live this life is because there's a lot of other um benefits too.
That's true. I don't know how we would have survived through much of what we have gotten through in our
Right.
lives. And I know you've written and talked about this a lot, but we've had two kids that have a lot of special needs, and then a third kid who has less.
Yeah.
Who's easier.
Right. There are three kids, but one of them
Yeah.
just kind of glided right through life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I almost died. It wasn't just that I
Mhm.
had cancer. It was bad, and
Yeah.
I had major complications from, life-threatening complications from the surgery.
Mhm.
And I don't know how we would have. And you were going through a bad, finance wrecking divorce when I met
Yeah.
you. And I really don't know how we would have managed or
Yeah.
um, survived all of that without sex work, without the flexibility and earning power that
Right.
it provides. So, I'm not saying that, I hope my, I hope none of my honest reflections on what was difficult for me
Mm-hmm.
come off as regret.
Yeah.
Um,
I
you
don't,
know,
yeah. I think they're just real.
yeah, I mean, I just think that you have to, sometimes you have to make, sometimes there are none of your choices in life are easy and all of the
Right.
paths are hard.
Yeah.
And, um,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
was interesting. I appreciate that you're saying that because I think that sometimes, and I mean, I feel like this might be useful to other sex workers who have spouses. Like, we were dealing with this a couple of weeks ago when I was going to go away for work again. And you were nervous because you were going to be at home by yourself. And it was like a hard week for you in your semester. And I felt like you were mad at me for going. And so I didn't want to hear what you were saying, but really what you were saying is, I'm afraid this is just going to be hard. And you just wanted to be like heard about that. And I felt defensive, like, well, we decided together and you said I could go. And you're like, yeah, I'm not telling you not to go. I'm just saying I think it's going to be hard. And sometimes I think we do just have to make like hard choices and we have to like hold those things together and be like, this is the best possible option for our family, but it's still hard.
yeah. And I mean, that's been a challenge for us, as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways in which I think historically we've taken responsibility for each other's feelings more
Mm-hmm.
than we
Yeah.
probably should. I mean, we've lived pretty entangled lives. We have, in
Mm-hmm.
many ways, like trauma bonded over things. And we've been,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and, um, and so there may be a degree of codependency there, but I, um, I
But
do
yeah, that's
think,
something that I've like struggled to work on is like recognizing that what you're doing is hard and that that's not some sort like what you're doing as the one who stays home and holds the fort down when I work this very irregular schedule um isn't a criticism of me. It's just also hard.
right. And that I can feel that that's hard. I can
Mm-hmm.
believe that that's hard. I can experience it as hard and still think that we've made the right decision
Yeah.
together. I can still support you. I can still
Yeah.
understand why this is the career path that you want to pursue and why that is probably the best thing for both of us.
Right.
And it can be hard, right? Like
Yeah.
I can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. And I can even ask you to validate that it's hard, right? And
Yeah.
say like,
Right.
X, Y, and Z just happened. I need to vent. Like,
Yeah.
I don't expect you to actually do anything or, come back or interrupt your trip in any way or even, feel guilty about things in any way. I just need to say,
Yeah.
hey, this is hard, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I think that that's been like a learning process for me to be like, yes, like you affirming that, like the times that you single parent because I have to travel or because I'm working opposite shifts than you or whatever, um, that you that it kind of forecloses intimacy when I don't want you to tell, like when I try to shut you down or defend myself instead of just hearing you, you know?
mhm.
And that's something that like I think both of us have been like working on in terms of juggling this like very kind of odd life that we've entered into together.
Right. And I have a lot of empathy for you too. I mean, the thing about your job is that like it requires a lot of emotional availability, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that may not be true of all forms of sex work, but it's true of a lot of forms of sex work.
And it's true of the way I work. Yeah.
And of the way you work. And so I also get that, like, the last thing you need is more emotional, someone else venting to you, someone else asking you to hold their feelings, right?
Yeah.
Like, I get that. And I think that's also a challenge of the work that's worth, acknowledging, is that, like, when you're in a relationship with a sex worker, they're often also holding a lot of other people's feelings. I imagine, like, therapists do this too.
Yeah,
I don't
I would
know,
think
but I
so.
imagine,
Yeah.
And social workers and other things. So it's
Right.
not, it's not like this is exclusive to sex workers.
Nurses and people who are in care professions. Yeah.
But it is a challenge, right? It is a challenge. And also I have, sympathy or empathy for that, because I get why, the last thing you might want after, like, being emotionally available to a bunch of people while you're on tour is to then, um, sort of hold space for me venting you, right?
Yeah. But I mean, you deserve a partner too, and I think that's been the thing that we've been trying to figure out how to hold together.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's just one of these tensions. It's not to say that, and this is why it's like, I want to have these honest conversations. You get antis who take this stuff and see, like, oh, see, this is structurally broken. It's terrible. It's like, no, all work is hard, right? All work is hard in different ways, at least, in a capitalist context. Like, we're like, all work, is hard in various ways. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that, there are some unique challenges associated with sex work. Because it is, because it's less predictable, and because it's a caring, job, at least this kind of sex work is. And, and that it has some unique challenges, but to still, also be like, and this is the thing that makes the most sense for us, and I support you in doing it, I don't know.
If because there isn't, like, a lot of space for spouses of sex workers that I see, like, what would you say to somebody whose partner, like, I'm not asking you to, like, give advice, but, like, what do you think you would say to somebody who is like, what is that like? Or what's the best way to handle things? Or,
well, you are asking me to
I am asking you to give advice. I'm trying not to, but I am asking you that.
I mean, I don't know, because it's, everybody has to handle their relationships differently. I think that, it's good to have boundaries, and it's good to have, like, at least what I'm working on. I can tell you that. I can't tell you what the right way to do things is. It's very possible we're doing things the wrong way. I can tell you what I'm working on. And one is that, like, over time, I've learned that I need to ask for more boundaries regarding your clients. And I don't know that this is an issue for everybody, but, like,
that's shifted a lot. You've just been like, I don't want you to tell me about this.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there are ways in which you like to information dump about all of your interactions. And you're like, here's the entire transcript of the conversation I had with,
not just with clients, with every interaction.
With everybody. Right. And so, but at some point, especially with clients, I have to be like, hey, I want to be with you. And if we spend 2 hours talking about your clients, then that makes me feel further disconnected from you rather than more connected from you. Like, I want to focus on the things that we share together, not your relationships with other people. And so, like, I've had to ask for some boundaries and, regarding, your
Yeah, and I
interactions
should say
with.
that we had like a unique situation because since we used to work together, some of my clients were people who used to be fans of us together. Some of them you had interacted with before. So like
Mhm.
it's less and less the case now the further we get away from that. But I feel like there was a period of time in which I was used to talking about it because you knew who I was talking about
Right. Yeah.
too.
Some of them
Yeah.
are shared fans or
Hmm.
whatever. But it's, it's also a personality thing. But
Hmm.
anyways, I think having those, just being able to like ask because we only get so much time together,
Hmm.
and just to be, I know you need to process that work stuff, but you also have like a whole bunch of sex worker community that you get to
Hmm.
process that stuff with,
Yeah.
and therapists and whatever. And then second, um, I think asking like for more time that we agree is like inviolable, like
Hmm.
making dates that we know aren't going to get disrupted
Canceled.
or
Yeah.
plans that we know aren't going to get canceled. And for me, see, the thing is like, again, because as you said, I'm autistic. I like going like a traditional date is can be kind of exhausting for me,
Hmm.
like having to get up and go out of the house and socially interact and follow like
Hmm.
script. And I'm not saying I can't enjoy that, but it's kind of exhausting. What I've learned that I needed is to plan like almost like undate time. Like to
Hmm.
say, we are going to be at home together where we can just kind of interact with each other in whatever way feels comfortable.
Hmm.
And you're not going to get up and leave during this time, but we're also not necessarily going to like completely plan it out in
Yeah.
advance.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and that's been really helpful for me to like conceptually to think that, okay, I can ask for, time that I know we're going to both be home,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be like a structured date.
Right. Hmm.
And so though, at least from my perspective, like those are the two things that I've had to learn to
Hmm.
ask for,
Yeah.
that have helped me better
I think that's
handle.
really useful.
But I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know how, other people with different brains process this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I don't feel like I can actually,
Yeah.
you know,
No, but
s-
I think that that's really useful because what you're saying is that like there's a or what I hear you saying is that there's a way that sex work can become this like can permeate all of the other parts of your life. And what you want is for there to be some space away from that, like in our relationship.
yeah, I guess so. I don't really think about it that way. It's probably
Yeah.
more eloquent than what I said, but that seems right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that that's fair, but that's true. And like you said, I mean, that's true of a lot of jobs, and I think that that's good relationship advice in general is to like take time away from the other responsibilities that you have, be them like work or family or whatever, to like foster your relationship. That's regardless of what at all what it is that you're doing, like to like the whole purpose of the show is to like take time away from hustling
Mhm.
and create something that's separate from that where you can just be like in a space with each other.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. And I guess that one other thing I'll say is that I used to be a lot more concerned about safety issues,
Hmm.
and and I do think having check-ins and like a routine around safety
Yeah.
is good and important. Like I like to know that I could access like where you're going to be and when you're supposed
Hmm.
to check in. Um, Over time, that's become less an issue for me, just because I don't know. Now I feel like you're an expert. Now I feel like you know how to gauge things, and
Yeah.
but early on, and I could imagine, someone was actually listening to this with,
Yeah.
for advice, which again, caveat emptor, right? Like, I don't know, please don't, use my autistic brain as like the, but I, but I do know that I was worried about safety stuff,
Mm-hmm.
earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
And those worries got easier as you got more confident and I got more confident in your
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Also, what
ability.
happens over time is that you end up with like way more regulars, like, and
That's true
so,
too. Yeah.
yeah. So I think maybe part of the more like calmness is that like a huge majority of the people that I see are people that I've seen many times
Yeah.
at this
I think
point.
that's true. That
Yeah.
definitely. And that doesn't really stress me out much at all. So that's helpful. But yeah, occasionally it just depends on the situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I do feel some anxiety, about the safety issues still. And I know I did a lot earlier
Yeah.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, I don't know. I mean, obviously, um, you have to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess as a partner, you can't or shouldn't, control all of those things,
Right.
and so again, I just asked for, you know, what we wanted and still generally do is like I have a very basic skeleton view of what your schedule is.
Mm-hmm.
So if I didn't hear from you, I would know where you were, and
Yeah.
I have a general sense of when I'm going to be expecting to hear from you,
Yeah.
and as a sort of safety check. But that over time has become so routine and so just
Mm-hmm.
like a groove that we don't really like. I don't know. It's not like we're planning a heist anymore, it's just like it's just the natural rhythm of our lives
Yeah.
now.
Uh-huh.
And so um I don't know. Anyways, I don't know that I have any advice
No,
regarding that.
what I wanted to say in regards to all of that is that like I want to thank you in a lot of ways because you've shown me what it looks like. And I struggle with this more than you do, but it like you've shown me what it looks like to just trust your partner's like judgment. Because often, even if you are anxious about things, like you make me feel like you trust my judgment and that I will tell you if there's like a problem. And I've never felt like second guessed by you, or I've never felt like you don't think that I can manage my work and my life, and I appreciate that. I think you've been very good at that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think that was a growth area for me as well. Like, I think, that's, maybe I started that growth process before I met you, but I
Mhm.
think, you know, um, I think is something I had to learn
Mhm.
as well, to be able to trust your partner and respect their autonomy and
Mhm.
like, believe to both be supportive and be there and ask for what you need. And I think it's okay to like, you know, feel like you need check-ins and like,
Yeah,
to
right.
like, I mean, I think their fear can be real, especially if we're talking about in-person interactions.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's okay to have needs in those regards, but I also think it's really important to like, respect your partner's autonomy and to
Mhm.
trust them to find, you know, the system that works for them or to figure
Yeah.
out how to navigate things in the way that works for them and to not turn your needs into like, I don't know, trying to micromanage somebody else,
Yeah.
like to acknowledge them as your needs and not
Yeah.
as someone else's.
Yeah, you are better at that than me. So like, thank you. I'm working at that on my end. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's actually like a really beautiful place to end on like thinking about how we can support our partners like autonomy and the choices that they make both in their work and their life. So I end every episode with 3 questions. So what are you reading?
This is always a hard question because I don't actually read a lot.
It doesn't matter. You can listen to them on audio.
Well, but I don't read a lot during the school year because but okay. I guess technically the book that I'm in the middle of right now on audio is Polywise, which is the follow-up to the Polysecure book, which is very much like a relationship. I don't want to say self-help, but it's kind of self-helpy.
So what are you getting out of Polywise?
What am I getting out of it? That relationship transitions are really, really hard, and that that it can take people a while to adapt. And that moving from that, we think about transitioning from non-monogamy or from monogamy to non-monogamy as like a or the transition. But transitioning between different types of non-monogamy can be just as hard or harder.
Yeah. And, on a personal note, that's been true for us.
Yeah, but it's very validating to, hear a psychologist, a therapist, talk about how common that is.
Yeah, so maybe we're not just like broken.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's normal.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you listening to?
My students have gotten me into Chappell Roan lately.
Okay.
I'm like always listening to Gen Z stuff in order to keep my classes relevant. I don't know. New St. Vincent just came out. It's weird. I'm not sure if I like it yet. What else am I listening to? I don't know. That's, I guess,
noir. You listen to a lot of noir radio.
Yeah, but not lately. But I will come back to that, I'm sure. Old like radio detective fiction. I was getting into that Janelle Monáe album that's
I love that
already
too.
Been out for a couple years recently.
Melissa Milk, who is a friend of the show, introduced me to that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. That was when we interviewed them, or when I interviewed them, that was their pick for what they're listening to.
Yeah. I guess the most right now I'm listening to Chappell Roan.
Okay.
So you can thank my Gen Z students for that.
Okay. And what are you excited about?
Oh my gosh. I'm excited. Well, I'm excited about it being summer in general. We're going on a trip that I'm excited about to West Virginia. And I'm really excited about
where we're not going to be hustling.
Right. Well, I'll be reading, so it's kind of hustling, but it's still work.
But it'll still be relaxing. Yeah.
But I still have to read a ton of books for a book committee. But but there's a Polaroid convention in New York City that I'm very excited about going to, and I'm finishing up converting a 1940s Graflex camera to shoot Polaroids, and I think it's basically ready to go. So I'm gonna go nerd out with a bunch of other camera nerds.
That'll be so great.
Yeah, and they'll appreciate.
I'm working while you're doing that, so I will be in New York City too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, where can people find you?
I guess Instagram.
Okay.
I don't know.
What's your Instagram?
pj.patella.ray. I think.
Yep, I think that's probably right.
And that's where I'm most active these days. So
okay. All right. Well, thank you. It's funny to interview you in my own house, in our house, but it was really great. I appreciate I appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about this, because I know it's hard for you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to do it for you. I hope people find something in there that makes it worth listening to.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I'm your host, Jessie Sage. You can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or visit my website at jessiesage.com. The show was produced by Emily Foster. The music is by Benjamin J. Benamati. Our intern is Anna Fisher. You can follow us on socials on Instagram and Twitter at Not Hustling Pod. Signing off. Have a great week.